This video is sponsored by CleanMyMacX. Hey guys, this is Carson Miller Tech here, back with another video, and in this video, I'm going to be doing the long-awaited DJI Phantom 3 Standard versus the brand new DJI Mavic Mini comparison. A lot of you guys have been looking out for this video since early January of this year, and I'm excited today to be comparing the two. And I do want to say the reason why I came about to deciding to compare these is, one, they are both marketed as beginner drones. This one came out in 2015, so it's been a while, but this one came out just last year, 2019, so it is newer, but the specs compare pretty closely. And also, this started at $500 and this starts at $399. But if you get the Fly More combo, which is the same price as the $500 Phantom 3 Standard, you get it all basically for $500, and it's smaller. But is smaller better? I don't know. You'll have to wait till the end of this video. But with that being said, let's get right into the comparison. So let's start with the cameras. This one is a pretty easy starting point. Both of these have a 12 megapixel camera on them, which shoot at 2.7K 30 frames per second max. But the Mavic Mini does have a sensor that is capable of recording at 1080p at 60 frames per second, whereas the Phantom 3 Standard does not. Both videos though are recorded at 40 megabits per second, so they are similar in that sense, but it's just that the Mavic Mini does record at a higher frame rate if you need that. Both have an aperture of 2.8, so that means you can get a decent amount of light into the sensor, and the Mavic Mini only shoots in JPEG. So this is something that's a little bit of a disappointment. The Mavic Mini is not capable of shooting any RAW images, whereas the Phantom 3 Standard does allow for JPEG and DNG, which is a RAW format, for when you're taking photos, which is something that you may or may not need. It really only if you don't know what it is. DNG, basically a RAW file, allows you to edit the photo after the fact way more than when you get a JPEG file, because with a JPEG it's already compressed right out of the camera when you get it on the card, but when you get a DNG file it is way easier to manipulate the photos in post. But if that's not something huge for you, then it may not be a big deal. But that is one thing where these kind of equal each other out, because this one does have higher frame rate in 1080p, but this can shoot better photos, or at least you can shoot RAW. I don't know if they are truly better photos, but I will be throwing them on the screen, two photos taken from each of these, just to show you side by side how they compare. Speaking of editing RAW files, if you have a Mac, today's video is sponsored by CleanMyMacX, and if you've never heard of it before, basically a good way of describing it is a toolbox for your Mac. It's pretty great. You can do a ton of things, such as cleaning up your computer, doing malware searches, and also just overall improving your Mac's performance, because let's face it, Apple doesn't always go and give you the best tools to fix up your Mac. So if you're in need of getting any performance improvements on your Mac, even if you don't know it yet, I would highly recommend checking out CleanMyMacX. I've been using it for the past couple of months, and it honestly has been a fantastic program. So I would highly recommend it. But yeah, let's get back to the video. Another camera spec that the Phantom 3 Standard beats the Mavic Mini on is this has a 94-degree field of view. So that means you'll be getting a much wider image. Not that it's that wide, but it's wider than the Mavic Mini, which only has an 83-degree field of view. So it is a little bit less. It's not the biggest deal, but if you are trying to capture wider landscapes, then the Phantom 3 Standard will have a wider field of view. So the last two things that comes down to cameras are the exposure settings. So both of these drones support 100 to 1600 ISO, but the Mavic Mini supports 100 to 3200 in both photo and video, whereas the Phantom 3 Standard only allows for 1 to 3200 in video mode, where in photos it only allows up to 1600, which is a little weird, but it's not that big of a deal. You're probably not really going to be using up to that high of ISO anyways, because it starts trashing out the quality, so it's not that big of a deal. But another thing in regards to exposure comes down to the Phantom 3 Standard allows you to change the shutter speed in video mode. It allows you to customize the video a little bit more by adjusting that exposure, which is great, but The Mavic Mini just doesn't have that, which is a little bit upsetting. You have to have this in video mode where you're not able to control the shutter speed. It does that automatically. There's not even a control on the remote that allows you to control the exposure if they ever added that. So yeah, that's a little upsetting. So moving on to some more physical specs, the biggest one that is different between the two is the weight. The Mavic Mini, of course, comes at a 249 gram weight, whereas the Phantom 3 Standard is 1,216 grams, which is 2.68 pounds. Now, comparing those, that is just crazy. I mean, the Phantom 3 Standard definitely is not going to be the easy carrying around drone. Whether you are a Part 107 holder or just a hobbyist, you will definitely have to register this. But with the Mavic Mini over here, you won't have to necessarily register it. Now, again, like I've mentioned in my other videos, just because you don't have to register it in the United States as a hobbyist does not mean you get to just go and break drone laws and be stupid with the drone. Like, that's not the point of registering it. The point of registering it is really just so then the government can go and see your specific drone and know of its existence. So if you lose it or something happens, then they know who to trace the drone back to. Also, the point of me having these hovering right now is because the Phantom 3 Standard says that it only has a 25-minute flight time, which typically comes out to about only 23 minutes, maybe 22. But the Mavic Mini has a solid 30-minute flight time, which usually comes out to about 30 minutes, which is fantastic to have in the drone. And if you're spending the $500 for the full Fly More combo, then you're getting 2 more batteries, which means in total, you're gonna get 90 minutes of flight time, which is astounding for such a small drone. I mean, obviously you will have to be switching out the batteries, but it is great to have the additional power for no more expense than it would be to buy just the Phantom 3 Standard alone. Also, if you paid much attention to the drones behind me, the Mavic Mini has both GPS and GLONASS GPS positioning, whereas the Phantom 3 Standard only has GPS. So the Mavic Mini comes out on top here because it has numerous satellites to connect to. You won't ever really have to worry about not having connection to satellites. I mean, you will if you're like in a building or you're in a forest or something like that where there is outside sources interfering, but otherwise most of the time you'll have far more satellites to connect to with the Mavic Mini, which allows it to hover in place far better than the Phantom 3 Standard, which has been over here bopping around and doing whatever it wants to do. The Mavic Mini is pretty consistent in its hovering, so that is down to the fact that it has the extra GPS positioning. So moving on to how your phone connects to these two drones. This is a huge one that you may not even think about, but the Phantom 3 Standard, you have to connect to the controller through Wi-Fi. There's no way to connect it through the controller itself. Many think that this port down here, which is a micro USB, is able to connect to your phone, but it's not. This is purely for charging. But on the other hand, with the Mavic Mini, you connect your phone in directly through a cable connected into the drone. So where this comes in clutch is when you are going and actually controlling the drones, because when you're flying further away, you won't have to worry about video quality loss as much with this, whereas you do with this. And you could also have outside Wi-Fi interference with the Phantom 3 Standard, whereas this isn't as prone to the outside interference because you're connected directly in. And you're connected into a direct 720p 30 frames per second stream downlink. And that goes for both of these. They both have a 720p 30 FPS downlink, which those aren't different between those, so I just thought of mentioning that. But it definitely does make a difference, and I've noticed a huge difference in connecting directly to the controller compared to connecting to Wi-Fi. And it also is just a convenience factor. Plugging your phone directly in is far easier than going into the phone settings, connecting to Wi-Fi, and then opening the DJI Go app, and then finally being able to see your camera view from your drone. Also, speaking of the controllers themselves, I gotta say, the Phantom 3 Standard is far more easier to go and modify to hold an iPad. So if you're somebody who likes to go and fly with their iPad, you're definitely gonna have an easier time going and modifying this controller and fitting it on here. And plus, the fact that it has a lanyard connection right on the controller itself just makes the whole experience of having an iPad that much easier. With the Mavic Mini, you get a smaller controller, and this is not easily modified, especially to hold a iPad, but it does come with the removable joysticks, so that is nice to have, I suppose, but it just doesn't have that, and it doesn't have the lanyard holder either. You can buy adapters to go and put into the controller itself so then you can have a lanyard holder on it. But it's just nothing compared to actually having a lanyard holder on the controller itself. So I definitely miss that with the Phantom 3 line of drones and basically all Phantom drones that have the spot right there to put your lanyard. Not gonna lie, I kind of forgot that the Phantom 3 Standard there does not have downward facing sensors, and that's another point that the Mavic Mini definitely has. It has downward facing sensors. It doesn't have any other obstacle avoidance sensors on it like other DJI drones do, but it does have downward facing sensors, which makes landing a whole lot easier, whereas this Phantom 3 Standard, I mean, I can bounce off the ground if I want, which I already did, so when landing, it is a little bit more manual, which is totally fine, but it is a different experience than when you have the downward facing sensors helping you out and assisting you in landing, so yeah. Now this one comes down to the size again. Can the Mavic Mini fit into your pocket? Yes, it can. Now, can the Phantom 3 Standard? Nice try. But, will it even fit in a backpack? Yes, the Mavic Mini will fit into a backpack. Depending on the backpack size, you may be able to fit the Phantom 3 Standard, but with most of my backpacks, it ain't happening. Even still, you can actually fit the entire Mavic Mini Fly More combo kit into a backpack. So that's just fantastic, being able to carry all 3 batteries, the drone, and the controller all in such a small package inside of a backpack, especially if you're going somewhere and maybe you're going on a hike or something like that and you don't want to worry about a big clunky drone. Do have to say, having the smaller size is fantastic. So another thing between these two where the Mavic Mini does win is in range. The Mavic Mini has a 4-kilometer or 2.5 mile range, which is crazy for such a small drone, but it is a fantastic thing to have, whereas the Phantom 3 Standard only maxes out at a said 1,000 meters or 1 kilometer, which is about 0.62 miles. And considering that's such a short range, you will have issues with the video transmission cutting out far sooner. But even as long as you're not flying outside of visual line of sight, you will probably have a better video quality signal on your phone with the Mavic Mini than you would with the Phantom 3 Standard, just because this doesn't have as far of a range. So you won't have to worry with the Mavic Mini if you're flying and you're maybe in a high interference environment. This won't be as susceptible just because it has the longer range capabilities, whereas this definitely will. And it comes down again to also the fact that you're connected to your controller through your phone through Wi-Fi. So it's not a direct connection. So there's another point of interference that can be introduced when flying the Phantom 3 Standard. Finally, between these two drones, the top speed of the Phantom 3 Standard is 16 meters per second, which is almost 36 miles an hour, which is pretty crazy. But the Mavic Mini is a little bit slower at 13 meters per second, which comes out at about 29 miles per hour. So it is slower, but even still, because of its small size, it almost feels like it's faster because it can go and maneuver itself far faster than you can with this. But if you're just doing a drag race between the two, then the Phantom 3 Standard is more likely to win because its top speed. It is nice in wind conditions because the Phantom 3 Standard also beats out the Mavic Mini in its performance in wind conditions, where it can go and fight winds at up to 9 meters per second, whereas the Mavic Mini can only do 1 meter per second slower in winds of 8 meters per second, which is about 18 miles an hour, or 17.9 if you want to be specific. So these in wind they're pretty close in their performance, but the Phantom 3 Standard is more likely to go and not have a flyaway. But because of its GPS abilities, it probably will go and have more issues with hovering in the same place. But because of its heavy weight, it's not as susceptible to flyaways. So you do have to worry about flyaways with the Mavic Mini just because it's so small and so light that it can definitely be caught up in a breeze. So that is something to watch out for. Whew, so that was quite a lot. But after comparing both of these and flying them around for a while, I do gotta say that one does come out on top. And if you're just comparing the specs, then I gotta say the Mavic Mini does come out on top. It has a lot of things that it could do better. That's not to say that it doesn't have everything great. I mean, for example, it is smaller, so in wind like this right now, it struggles like quite a bit. And I might make a video about this in the future. Let me know if you want to see that type of video. But in this type of wind that I've been flying in here today, it just doesn't perform as well as the Phantom 3 Standard. Now, the Phantom 3 Standard can't just go and like deal with the wind entirely. I mean, it also struggles, but it doesn't struggle as much as the Mavic Mini because, first of all, it's not as light, it's a larger drone, and it's got bigger propellers to move air faster. So those are some things that the Mavic Mini doesn't do as well. But pretty much overall, the Mavic Mini does nearly everything that the Phantom 3 Standard does and better. But it is ultimately up to you to decide which drone and which features matter to you. Because there are some things that some people may find more important than others. So again, like I was mentioning earlier, as far as purchasing price goes between these two, the Phantom 3 Standard nowadays, honestly, it is quite expensive because DJI has stopped producing the drone. It's discontinued them, and so if you're buying a brand new Phantom 3 Standard, you're going to be looking at about $700, maybe even $750. But if you're buying a used Phantom 3 Standard, which most of the people that are selling the Phantom 3 Standard are also selling like cases, extra props, controller mods, just a bunch of stuff that they've accumulated over time. So you may get more with just buying a used Phantom 3 Standard. Of course, make sure that it is a functioning drone and that there aren't issues with it before purchasing, but overall, it is a cheaper drone, so with very similar specs, you may want to go with the Phantom 3 Standard. But if you're willing to pay the new price for the Mavic Mini, I think it's worth it because even $399 is just insane. For this small of a drone and all the performance that it has, it is a fantastic drone. And also, if you go and spend $100 more on the Fly More combo, you get 2 additional batteries and you get the prop guards, which most people don't use those. I mean, I used them for like 5 minutes and then took them off. But yeah, so overall, both the drones are fantastic drones. If I would have to go back to when I first got the Phantom 3 Standard, would I change my mind? And if these were out at the same time? Probably. I mean, the Mavic Mini with its small size is fantastic to have, but it isn't everything. So, you know, it was great to be able to fly this as my beginner drone, and even if this was my beginner drone, I feel like both have their positives. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to let me know by both liking this video and subscribing. Also, if you want to see more future videos about the Mavic Mini, I do have a couple planned, but if you have any ideas of what you want to see, let me know down in the comments below. If you want to watch my last video, which compared the Mavic Mini in noise level to the Phantom 3 Standard, the Mavic Pro Platinum, and the Mavic 2 Pro, then you can find that up there, and some random videos should be down there. With that being said, that is it for this video. See you in the next one. Peace. Now you're just going to be in the bloopers.
I don't care. Hey, at least I get to be in a video. After we've already been dating for a year. Come here.
We're super overexposed.
I know, it's really